boys and girls, it's Miss Chelsea. We sure do miss having y'all at school with us, but we wanted to make sure that you were able to hear our start read for the week. So I'm gonna share with you our book this week, and the title of this book, remember that's the words, it tells us the name, says Otis and the Scarecrow. Now you might be thinking, Otis? I've heard of Otis, and you are right. It's another story about our friend Otis the tractor. Okay? So in this story, you might see on the cover, Otis is right here. I see a scarecrow, and I see lots of farm animals. Remember, those were Otis's friends. So they are all surrounding that scarecrow. I wonder what they're doing together. So let's read our book and find out, okay? This is Otis and the Scarecrow. It was summer when the Scarecrow first came to the farm, where the friendly little tractor Otis lived. This was back when the corn was tall and it was ripe. Ripe means it's ready to eat. So this corn is ready to be eaten. Otis recalled how the crows had scattered at first, so they flew away. They wanted nothing to do with the scarecrow. You see the scarecrow right here in the field? But this made the farmer pretty happy that the crows wanted nothing to do with the field. Otis was also happy because a new friend had come to live on the farm. But when Otis went to welcome him, he went to say hello. The scarecrow didn't smile or say hello. He just stood there with a sour look on his face, staring at the cornfield. So a sour look. It's kind of like a mean look. So after a while, Otis left him alone. So I'm thinking, Otis probably doesn't want to stick around the scarecrow if, he's going to leave him alone because he's got this mean, sour look on his face. Doesn't look too happy. When the farm animals came by to greet the scarecrow, once again, he didn't smile or say hello. He just stood there with that sour look on his face, staring at the cornfield. The animals didn't know what to think. Who was this new creature? The horse, he curled up his lip because the scarecrow had a musty smell. And the ducks pointed at his tattered clothes. So he's got clothes that are torn. The little calf and the puppy, they were frightened by him. And finally, the bull snarled, he huffed, and he turned away. And the scarecrow just stood there, alone. So these animals are thinking, we're not messing with him. We're going to leave him alone. Summer passed, and by, the crows started to come back around. They perched, and they picked, and they even pecked at the scarecrow. Otis noticed that the scarecrow didn't shoo them away. He just stood there with that sour look on his face, staring off at the cornfield. Otis puffed a soft sigh and turned around to catch up with his friends. Autumn eventually arrived. So that's fall. That's what we're in now, the season fall. The days grew shorter and cooler, and harvest time had left the fields bare except for the plump pumpkins dotting the field orange. Otis began pulling wagons filled with children who were very eager and ready to pick out a pumpkin. The farm looked different. But Otis loved the changing seasons, and he worked and played as hard as ever, Put, puff, puttity chuff. It was a splendid time on the farm for being together with your family and friends. So it was a wonderful time for them. They were having so much fun. The cool air drifting through the hills made the animals more rambunctious than they had been before. So they're a little bit more wild. They're a lot more playful. A simple game of follow the leader turned into a reckless race over the rolling hills. And a game of hide and seek turned into a rowdy rendition of Ring Around the Rosie, and the animals playfully circling Otis as he sat counting 1 puff, 2 puff, 3 puttity, 4 chuff. When Otis tuckered out from all the games, that means when he was tired from all of the games, he headed up to the hill to the apple tree, and his frisky friends, who were very playful, would join him. And when they were all sitting together, Otis would challenge them to a different game. It was the quiet game. A quiet game is a contest where everyone must stay quiet and very still. So no sounds, no laughing, no snorting, no quacking, no giggling, and no puffing. The player who stays quiet the longest wins. Otis knew the animals loved playing any kind of game, even one that challenged them to sit still. So to start the game, Otis would surge his engine, would get it going, and get everybody's attention. And he would take in a deep breath of air and let out a long, soft put, puff, puttity, shh. So I'm thinking this game might be a little difficult for these animals because they're pretty rambunctious, a little wild, and this is requiring them to kind of be still and be quiet. So we'll see how they do. Otis would sit quietly, and he just looked over the farm. There was Mud Pond, full from the autumn rains, and there were plump pumpkins dotting the fields orange. There were the shocks of corn, all in a row. And there still was the Scarecrow. He was all alone, staring sternly at the empty cornfield. So he just keeps staring at it, never moving. The puppy was always the first to lose the quiet game. He just couldn't sit still. Then the bull would start to twitch his nose, which made the little calf giggle, and this made the bull chuckle. He made him laugh. And with his snort, that would amuse the ducks, and their bottoms would start to wiggle. And when they would wiggle, they could not hold back their giggles. The sight of the ducks' wiggling bottoms would amuse the horse so much that he would roll on the ground, neighing with laughter. At this, the ducks would quack out loud, and soon everyone would be laughing and snorting and quacking and giggling. This always left Otis the winner. With a big grin on his face, he sat under the apple tree. One day, a cold rain set in, and Otis and the animals ran for cover under the apple tree. They huddled together, so they're all close together. They were huddling together to stay warm. As Otis looked over the farm, there was the overflowing mud pond, and there were shiny wet pumpkins and the soaked corn all in a row. And there, swaying back and forth with the cold wind and rain, was the Scarecrow. So he's still all alone. He's just out there swaying now because the wind's blowing. Otis Otis couldn't take his eyes off the Scarecrow. He thought about how the Scarecrow must feel. So he's out there all alone, the only one in the rain, and Otis is noticing he might be feeling kind of bad by himself. So Otis stood up, and he marched down the hill, crossed into the empty cornfield, and without hesitation, Otis chuffed and puffed straight up to the Scarecrow. So he left all his friends at the apple tree and went to where the Scarecrow was. Back under the apple tree, the animals were watching intently. So they're watching him real closely, like, what are you doing, Otis? They're curious. They don't know what he's doing. And there goes Otis with the Scarecrow. Otis looked up in the painted eyes of the Scarecrow, and he smiled. But the Scarecrow didn't smile back. He just stared off at the empty cornfield, as always. And the two of them stood quietly in that great big field as the wind and rain battered against them. So that means that wind, that rain, it was just hitting them. It was raining down hard. The wind was blowing hard against them. Then Otis turned his body around, and he backed up right alongside the Scarecrow. And with a chuff, he sat down next to him. Suddenly, the little calf and the puppy started to scamper down the hill. They crossed the cornfield, and they curled up right beside Otis. Gradually, the cow started to come, the horse ambled down, and before long, the ducks had waddled their way down. So all the animals are joining in. They're following Otis. These friends must really like Otis and respect him. And finally, the big bull came down into the field, joining the others. Otis surged his engine to get everybody's attention. He took in a deep breath, and he let out a soft put, puff, puttity shh. Otis and the animals sat quietly. So remember, that's what he would do when they would start the quiet game. So he has told them that they're starting. And remember, they like to play games together. But it wasn't until the puppy couldn't sit still another minute. The bull snorted on the calf's ears, the ducks wiggled their bottoms, and soon everyone was giggling, quacking, laughing, and even puffing. Everyone except the Scarecrow. Of course, he never uttered a sound. Usually it's Otis who wins. This time it was the Scarecrow. He didn't make any noise. Yet as Otis watched, he couldn't be sure, but he thought he might have seen the Scarecrow smile. Either way, Otis thought that the Scarecrow didn't look quite so lonely anymore now that he was surrounded by all his friends. So I remember at the beginning of the story, the Scarecrow was alone. But now look at him. All his friends are around him. They're watching him. So he's surrounded by friends. And that is the end of our story of Otis and the Scarecrow. Okay, so I want you to think about the story. Okay, and we know that Otis was a good friend in our previous story we read. Remember the one with the calf? And the calf got stuck in the mud? Well, in this story, it had to do with Otis and the Scarecrow. And remember, the Scarecrow was looking kind of lonely at the beginning. He was standing by himself. But why do you think the Scarecrow didn't look lonely at the end? So what made him not look lonely? I want you to think about that. Okay? Well, we miss y'all. We hope you have enjoyed our story of Otis and the Scarecrow, and we can't wait to see you when you come back. Bye, boys and girls.